And it may take you 40 years or 50 years to pay off that loan, at the way it is. So it's like, it's crazy, right? So I'm just kind of wrapping this back around to freedom and control. And that's what we need. We need control of our money because that's our destiny. That's our security and it's our freedom. So I love this. I just love thinking like this. And this is with that kind of mindset and the stuff you're bringing, Tom, this is a way to maintain that, and create true wealth. Are you tired of working more for less profits in your home service business? What if I could show you $100,000 in hidden annual profits in your business in less than 3 minutes? Would you be interested? And not only show you where, but how to create that 100K in 6 months or less without additional advertising or marketing spend guaranteed. Just go to sharpenthespearcoaching.com to see how truly simple it is. That's sharpenthespearcoaching.com. Do it now. And we are back on Sharpen the Spear podcast with another incredible guest. I've got my buddy Tom. Tom, we are going to get into some great stuff here today, and I'm going to hold to our usual tradition of no one knows Tom better than Tom. So, Tom, give us a little backstory, bring us up to speed, let us know where we're at, what we're going to be hitting on today, because I'm excited to get into this.
That's awesome, Richard. I've really been looking forward to jumping on this podcast with you and talking shop. And, it's funny you mentioned getting to know yourself. I think that's something that I think a lot of people, including myself, didn't know for a while, right? As you get older, you start realizing more about yourself, the good, bad, and ugly. But, my background, I consider myself a refugee from the corporate America world, right? I spent most of my career in corporate America, and it only took me a short couple of decades to figure out it wasn't a right fit. I had to claw my way out of it through a lot of pain and a lot of introspection. So I left the corporate world and, doing finance operations, and I started my own sort of wealth strategy practice because I slowly learned that I needed to not only control my own wealth personally for myself and my family. There are a lot of other people in this world that needed that too and want that too, but just didn't know how. And so it was my duty and obligation to now pursue this as my own passion, my own sort of business, to open up and empower others to kind of do that for themselves. And so I'm anxious to get out in the world and share people all that's available to them and hopefully educate them and empower them to do what they really actually want anyway, is to own their own lives and certainly their wealth.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think, we know for sure, I don't think this is up for debate, that no one is being educated in the area of money at any level throughout the school system, most of their lives, even as adults. We've seen it. We see records of whether it's bankruptcies or people living below poverty or just barely getting by, it's paycheck to paycheck. The average American family will be bankrupt in 30 days. You hear all these kind of stats all the time, and you sit there like, am I that person? How do I figure that out? And then how do I actually not be that? And that's the big thing. I think that's what I love about your mission, is that you got to bring this stuff to regular people. Too many times I think we've been told the lie about it's the super rich. It's just this class of person can do this. It's just not true. I'll stop it there. I'm not going to go into what it is, the reasons why, but it is up to us, right? I mean, there's really personal responsibility here. And that's why I want to have you on, to really get into this, to show people there is a way to actually do this.
Yeah, and there's a lot in this world of so much information and access to information. Can imagine, I've spoken to a lot of people about it, it can just be so confusing to figure out what's actually true and what information to trust. And that's why I've always sort of pressed upon people that you're either going to control it or someone's going to control it for you. And that's what I sort of unraveled as I was exploring this for myself, because I had advisors, when I was working in my W-2 job, and I was following the same old typical advice that you hear everywhere, right? Say maybe from a Dave Ramsey. And you kind of wonder, you never really unpack it to investigate whether it's actually right or wrong. You just assume it's right? It's what you hear all the time, and you just get used to it and numb to it until you actually start investigating it and thinking about it and broadening your horizons on other information that may send a different message or share a different perspective on it. And, that's kind of what I was fortunate enough to come across.
Yeah, that's great. It's just, it is the thing with whether it's media or anything, but normal, I air quote normal here, normal is usually wrong. What people accept as truth, as normal, what I have found, and I was blessed to be born a contrarian. Okay, so I have not done what others do my whole life. It served me well. I've, gone off track a few times, but it served me pretty well. But they don't really think, is there something else? Is there a better way to do this? What does this really cost me? And here's a good point I know you hit on. What does it really cost me to invest my money? Right? Because people think, well, they're investing and they're making money, but there's always a cost to everything we do. And I'd love to get into that too, because it's like I tell people, all my clients, like, well, whatever you say yes to means you're saying no to something else. And if you can just understand that dichotomy, it's going to help you, because you can't do everything.
Right.
So if I'm going to give you an hour of my time, I'm going to say no to someone else who wants my hour or something else I could be doing, right? I have to prioritize this stuff. So there's always a cost to everything that we do, and wealth building is no exception.
You're spot on, and it comes in so many shapes and sizes. I mean, when, I joked around the other day with somebody, I'm not a massive fan of paying taxes. And obviously taxes it was supposed to be temporary. Well, here we are 100 plus years later. It's only growing in complexity and amounts of our money that are being taken away. But, that tax you pay is basically a loss of money. And that money stops earning for the rest of your life. So that's a secondary loss and cost, an opportunity cost, like you're describing. So when you really unravel and peel back the onion on all of these things, there's, it's inevitable. I find hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars that are basically getting away from people, right? In a lot of cases, unknowingly. And, listen, I think most people are good people. Even some of the financial advisors I've come across in my life, I think they're trying to do good for the most part. They just have never sort of seen anything else, so they get indoctrinated to the same sort of philosophy that gets sort of thrown around. And unfortunately, it actually is causing a lot of people to lose wealth.
I think
they don't have to.
There's the point. So you say lose wealth, but it doesn't just evaporate. Someone is getting that money that you're not getting, that you've given. Even if people, they get all excited about their rebate, their rebate or whatever the refund at the end of the year.
Yeah, right.
They're all excited about their refund they're going to get. I'm like, you're excited about some of the money that the government has held for you for a year, that you're going to get some of that back. You're excited. I mean, it's like they've taken all your money. They're making interest on it, spending it as they will, where you could definitely do more with that money than they could. But somebody somewhere is getting that money, whether it's a defense contractor or this program or that program or whatever it is. You have to understand, like, they're not holding it for charity reasons. They're not doing you a favor. So the goal has to be to keep more of what you earn. And we're talking legally. I mean, the tax code is, I think it's at 70,000 pages, plus or minus a few. Like, who knows that, right? Like, when was the last time you read a 70,000 page book? That's the complexity you're talking about, Tom. And people have to understand, it's not that like it's insurmountable, though it's designed to be, right? Roll over and just pay. I think it's important to understand that there are these methods to keep more of what you earn. We all work very hard for our money, regardless of the amount. If I have a 16-year-old who's making $300 a week working at a fast food place, she should get to keep most of that. Okay, if not all of it, but they don't. My son worked 100 hours last week in his job, 100 hours. Okay, or 2 weeks ago. The check comes, he's floored at how much is taken out of it. Wow. You're penalized for working hard. All that overtime, so 55 hours of overtime in a week, penalized. Took $1,000 out of his check for tax. Okay. He's a 17-year-old kid.
Right, to your point, before they get to use it, right?
Right.
They're not stupid. They take their money first, because if they didn't, they know a lot of people wouldn't give it to them at the end of the day. They're going to take it out first, and we give them basically an interest-free loan, and they give that money back come April 15th.
I always tell people, I can solve the whole tax issue with one thing. Everybody writes a check April 15th. They don't take it out during the year, but they tell you, now you owe me $7,000, write me a check. Watch what happens. The tax rate will be next to zero. Okay. But they've contrived this whole thing. Take it out of your check, get paid first, like you're saying. So they're getting all that money. You don't know how much they're really taking. Ask anyone. They don't know. They're just doing because they're supposed to. That's what you do. And when you spoke about the income tax, same thing. This is a World War I little whole Federal Reserve nonsense. Let's have a war. Let's demand income tax. It'll be temporary. Oh, wait. Yes. There's no such thing as a temporary tax. It never goes away, right? The only things the government, I think, has ever stopped funding, Tom, is pushing the metric system. I think that's the only thing they finally gave up on. It's like, it's the one thing that's never going to happen, so we're just going to stop and we'll shift it to something else. So, but it's, for an entrepreneur, it's a sore spot. The whole taxation thing, it's difficult. So let's talk about easing that pain. Let's get into that.
Yeah. And I think this is where you kind of, it changed my sort of perspective on things when I first heard this. And I know you, being a seasoned veteran you are around the business owner, entrepreneur space, this will hopefully resonate, is that, the tax code in its complexity, to your point, they don't get rid of stuff. They just keep on adding and changing. So most of the accountants really, unfortunately, they're hamstrung. They can't keep up either, right? So what happens? They have to focus on trying to stay compliant. They're not learning about tax strategy, right? How to mitigate taxes. You're just reporters and compliance arms. And that's an important role, but they're not actively becoming tax planners and help strategizing how to prevent it going forward. And that's a reality. And I've come across a lot of them. They do good work, but they're just not able to keep up and learn about that. So when I heard this sort of from this guy, Tom Wheelwright, he wrote a book called Tax-Free Wealth. Really, I would encourage folks to read it. And he said this, the tax code is essentially a set of incentives that the government puts forth to help direct things that they care about and they want to do that they themselves can't do. So when you kind of take it from that perspective, it's still a controlling mechanism, but they want to control how we act, right? And if you act in the way that they deem appropriate or beneficial to this economy, they're going to reward you by being a partner with you from a tax perspective and reduce your taxes. For example, you give to charity. They want that. They want you to be charitable. So what do you do to get a deduction for that? They want you to save for retirement, right? Because then they don't have to pay as much in Social Security, right? They can't, so they give you benefits for these sorts of things, right? So start a business, own real estate and rent people. So all these things, when you take that lens, your obligation as a citizen is actually to reduce your taxes, because the more you do, the more you're actually helping support what the government wants us to do, right? And help grow this economy, right? So when you put it in that lens, it's actually a good thing to reduce taxes.
Right. Yeah, so true. I mean, it's always that challenge of, it's a good thing. And I always go back to, but I want to do my good thing. Okay. That's what I want to do. I don't want someone else telling me what's good and what's bad for my life, for my situation. And they kind of do that generality thing. Everyone's like this. And that's where, again, I'm coming very much from the entrepreneurial mindset. A guy who has to start, build, do, doesn't get bailouts. Everything's on us, right? So you get in a mindset of self-sufficiency in that way. And you say, well, I'd rather, if I lose all my money, which I've done. Okay. But I did that.
Yeah.
I lost some. No one else lost my money. I lost my money. So I'm the only one to blame. And I'm okay with that. I lived. I did not die. And here I am, and I got to make more and everything else. So I totally get it. So what I want, and I think you can help with this too, is I want at least give us the opportunities, okay? What are the actual opportunities that we can now build our wealth, okay, with minimizing the tax that they want to incur on us, right? Like forever, not just deferred.
Yes.
Like, oh, I get to wait and then my money makes money so they can really whack me when I want to actually use it. So it's this it's like a dysfunctional relationship. I'm going to let you live here, but I'm not going to be mean to you for a while, but then I'm going to get really mean at the end. I'm going to take half what you got. Okay, so I don't know. I'm always looking like what, and I know there's a million ways. This is the good side. So we're going to stay on the good side of this because there are ways to do this, right? There's are ways to like really, really increase our wealth in a big way, right, Tom?
Absolutely. And that's, and I suspect given your audience are entrepreneurs and such, obviously the Robert Kiyosaki way of thinking, the 4 quadrants, employee, self-employed, rather business owner, investor, like those sorts of things really helps to sort of give you a little roadmap of how they think about it, right? Because an employee is pretty much, there's not many options, right? That isn't what they're looking to support from a government. Not that they don't want people employed, right? That still generates revenue, but it's not helping the broader economics or development of a country. So this is where you have to kind of understand why they put these incentives in place, right? To be a business owner, right? That you're creating, like you said, creating something new, adding more value to the world, employing people, right? All those sorts of benefits will give you a chance to take advantage of the tax code, right? Because they want to incent you through deductions, right? More ways you can save for retirement if you want to, more than a regular employee, right? And then the investment side is like, just like real estate, like owning real estate and selling businesses and all these sorts of things. There are definitely beneficial tax sort of angles to it because they want you to take on that risk. If you didn't, a lot of people wouldn't if that tax break wasn't there. Right? So they have to incent that sort of behavior or people wouldn't do it, right? Just like you're describing. So they have to build these things in there so that, it isn't, if you didn't have to start, if you weren't going to get all these benefits of starting a business, it might not be worth it to people, right?
Yeah, it's a weird, it's kind of a little quandary really, like, because you're incentivized, but it's like a battle though. It's like you have these incentives and they kind of hope you don't find them because then they get to keep more, right? But they make you do the extra work to get it instead of saying, well, it's like if you didn't have those things and you got to make money and keep your money, you would think people would just build a business and make money and keep their money, reinvest into what they feel is worthy, right? Whether that's a charity, a local church, another business, whatever that is, they can do that kind of stuff. So it is a weird game we have to juggle. And then people will say, oh, what about the roads and this? And they have all the little reasons to be taxed. And I think that a study I'd read once, Tom, was 24% is the acceptable number of a tax rate where people will do it without cheating. Okay. So like they understand they got to pay something. So 20, but if it goes above 24, that's where people are looking to really not pay. Right. Which I still think is crazy high. Right. But it's regardless of what the number is. And right now they're looking to propose a 44% capital gains tax. I mean, that's almost half of your money that you invested in, made money on. They want to take half of it just because you took your money and you invested your money to make more money. And now they're going to take half of that money, just like your estate taxes and everything else, right? So and I'm throwing this garbage out there because I want people to remember, okay, that's what happens. But let's bring it around full circle on how we can avoid that, right? Like there is, like you're just saying, there is an ability to circumnavigate that, right?
Yeah. And a lot of them, so you start basic, when we think about, so there's 2 angles to this that I always think about because as an employee, you're thinking about investments, right? You have to invest for the future. But a business owner, to make money, is a very different animal, right? You have to think differently too. You have to be more nimble and maybe even sometimes shorter term thinking, because you got to pivot with life. Investments is a kind of more of a longer term thing. So you have to kind of sustain it for long periods of time. So it's a very different animal in my mind. But the first thing before we ever even get to those things is to kind of save money, right? Storage of capital, right? And use and storage of capital, right? So the idea, everyone wants to get into an investment side of things. So one of the areas that I learned this, through my own sort of just exploration is, storing capital. Where do we typically do it? Well, we do it in banks, right? Banks are there we're basically lending our money to banks, right? So they can use it and make more money. That's really what ends up happening. I'm giving them money, they're loaning it to my neighbor, right? And they take spreads. And that's how they make money, right? So in that sense, we all need some level of financing to live our lives, to spend money, to invest, to build things, whatever. Money, we still need it. We just rely on banks. Well, they're not really there to make us all that much money, right? They're just there for a storage bin. And if you make that teeny little interest, and then they tax it, right, on top of it. So it's like adding insult to injury. So we store money in what we call family banks, right? And this is built on some of the history behind this around the Rockefeller families. This is how they store this money. They store it in specially designed life insurance policies.
Yes.
You're like, who the hell would do that? Like, why would you do life insurance? It's the worst place to invest. Well, I would agree, because it's not an investment. It's where they store capital and protect the most important asset, which is our lives and our ability to produce and earn. So we protect that from day one, and we store capital. And you know what happens? Because the government likes it, it's very tax advantaged. There's no taxation on any gain in these sorts of things. And lo and behold, you can use it as collateral to borrow against, to invest, to support your business, to take your kids to college, whatever it is you want to spend money on. But now you have a shielded environment where you control it, right? You don't have to ask for your money, right? Like the bank, you got to give all your information and you're basically disrobing for the banks, for them to give you a privilege to loan you money. Well, in this environment, you build it up. Now you control the capital. You act as the banker, and then you can also be the borrower, and you pay that back when you want. So that's one
with
angle.
Interest. With interest.
With interest, right.
You can loan your own money for interest.
Yeah.
So you got a friend who needs $5,000, you can loan them $5,000 on 6% and get that back. Now you're a bank.
You act like the banker. It's just a finance.
And your principal stays in there. You're taking that.
Yeah.
It's a great tool. It's a really, we could spend a whole episode on that, and I have on other stuff, but it's like, that's a great tool. I'm glad you brought that up. That's one people don't know about.
Yeah, that's that type of stuff. And even, again, we're not trying to, that isn't your investment. It isn't what you do to put all your money in, but it is where you store capital and deploy it, right? And then you can control it. And then hopefully you get big enough, you'll never even need the banks, right? You can self-fund things through that vehicle. But, that's just gives you an example of how we've been sort of brainwashed, because we automatically, before we get to touch it, who touches it first? The IRS takes it, right, through their withholdings. We're taught to throw it into a qualified plan, 401k or whatever, right, to put it into the Wall Street hands, right, because they need to have money to control, right? And then it goes into a bank, the left, right? That's how the system is built today. Right. And so they're all sort of controlling the mechanism flow of our money. Well, these are ways to kind of reverse that.
You know what's interesting about that too, Tom? So I have 6 kids. So say you've got 3 kids, 5 kids, 1 kid, whatever it is. Imagine if you start at birth putting money in their whole life insurance policy, $100 a month, $100 a month. Do that for 20 years and see what you got. It's like unbelievable, right? It's like the whole compound interest. I mean, it's an amazing thing for every kid, and then that can stay in there. You're setting them up for life. Then they can keep adding to that fund, right? Then they start to be their own bank. They buy a car with their money and pay back. But, the whole cycle begins, and there's a lot of power to that kind of stuff. But I like the point that you're saying we control where it goes, right? We control the benefit. I think more than anything, we control the benefit of our money. Otherwise, the banks benefit. It's like your personal home, right? People tell you it's an asset. It's a liability. It's an asset for the bank until you actually have paid off the mortgage.
Right.
And all the interest, right? And there's a whole nother story to that. But it really is understanding assets over liabilities. And this thing with just this example we just used, you're creating an asset. Okay, that asset, that's all yours. Everything that's creating an asset. It's not just saving. You're actually creating an asset, a vehicle that you can use down the road as that number gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Like I said, 20 years of that kind of stuff, and it's a powerful tool.
And that's why that, to me, they don't call it investment. I don't call it an investment because there's no, designed properly. You're not, and using the right vehicles, you're never going to lose. Right? It's not designed to lose. It's called life insurance for a reason. And so it just has this sort of unique characteristic to it. And if you design it properly for cash, it really can build, equivalent to bond yields, right? But better than a savings account. But that's not really the power of it, is that you can control this thing and use it to finance anything you want on your terms. Like what bank gives you allows you to create terms? It's their terms, right, that we have to adhere to. Again, this is just the control mechanism of it. So as long as you see that picture, it is super powerful, and especially if you're thinking generational wealth building. I put a policy on my kids. I basically protected my unborn grandchildren already, right, and their legacy down the road. So it's really thinking long-term about things.
Yeah, it's transferable, right? It's transferable. Yeah. So you can give that to the next one. And that you're creating a financial legacy, okay, through those kind of vehicles. That is what the Rockefellers did. They learned all this. They implemented all this kind of stuff, and it's generations and generations. But yeah, it definitely gets my Sharpen the Spear stamp of freedom approval. Okay. So it's like, we want things like that. Things along those lines, like just take it for what it is. Okay. And understand that when you have the control, it's always about control. It's always about control. Who controls my money? You get a student loan. Okay. Only the government can give student loans now. They control it, and they will get it back until your dying day. They'll take your Social Security. They'll take everything. You never get out of those, right? They're in control. And it may take you 40 years or 50 years to pay off that loan, at the way it is. So it's like, it's crazy, right? So I'm just kind of wrapping this back around to freedom and control. And that's what we need. We need control of our money, because that's our destiny. That's our security, and it's our freedom. So I love this. I just love thinking like this. And this is, with that kind of mindset and the stuff you're bringing, Tom, this is a way to maintain that, and create true wealth.
And that's why, when people ask me often, when I meet them, and like, where should I invest? And I said, and usually it's thinking of the more typical, what stock to pick, or what mutual fund, or, and usually that's what's typical automatic, because that's what we hear all the time. But that to me is almost parallel to almost speculation, because you have little to no control over what happens in there. And just given the nature, we may not have time to go through it today, but because they've pushed this passive income sort of approach, or passively invest in S&P 500, it won't lose. It's just now been indoctrinated. Now that's what most people are doing, actually, right? Regardless if these businesses are worth putting money into or not, right? You're just feeding more money into it, right? It's just a system. And so once that someday reverses, that could get super ugly, because you're just feeding a system. Even if the value of that company doesn't warrant it, we still give it more money. Would you do that for a business that you owned, right? If it's failing, like, you're just pumping more money into it.
Well, it goes back to that little saying, too big to fail. Remember that? Oh, wait, we got to bail out Goldman Sachs. They're too big to fail. GM, they're too big to fail. If they fail, blah, blah, blah. If they fail, they fail. Okay. That's my saying. Okay. If you can't support yourself, you're done. You have this monstrosity and two sides, everything else. Like no one bailed out my business in '08.
Right.
I went under, right? So all sore points. But the point is these things like you're talking about, you're just throwing cash in this. You think, okay, well, they're companies, but all of a sudden, wait, they should go under. That money should transfer somewhere else. It's like I use the example when the airlines are struggling, they're going bankrupt, they're going under, whether it's United Airlines or whatever. I go, well, do you think the planes evaporate? They don't. They get sold for 10, 20, 40 cents on the dollar to an efficient company that now can grab market share because they're running a profitable business responsibly. Now they get to pick that up. That's the free market, if you will, right?
Yeah.
So you don't get to bail them out so they keep the planes they can't afford and they couldn't run the business right, blah, blah, blah. But now you're going to reward them by keeping them in business. Right. And I'll stop there because I'm going to end up going down the rabbit hole. But you know what I mean? Like you want to make sure like that stuff you think there's security in that. Because I think wasn't it the early 2000s? Remember when the tech bubble busted?
Yep.
All these people started losing half of their 401ks. Mutual funds, so it went to 50% and less. No one got to retire. They all had to keep working. Remember that? It was like, oh, what happened? But I thought these were totally safe. 50% of its value. And those are big numbers at that time. If you're close to retirement, that's not $1,000. Okay, that's a whole lot of monies. To your point, it's a different way of thinking.
Yeah. And to that point, it's to actually just think and look at it for what it is. Not even trying to think if it's good, bad, or different, but like to the point, like understanding what's actually happening. What's that saying? Like once you know what's happening, you know what to do, right? But you got to get to the first part first. Understand really what's happening. And unfortunately, because I grew up in my W-2 as finance, I used to think about how to evaluate a business, right? What are the financials, all the cash flows, right? The discounted cash flow, all these models, all these fancy things. Well, when you create a system where you're just automatically putting money into things and increasing its popularity, you're increasing the value without it really being valuable, right? It doesn't work anymore. It's now like it's corrupted in that way, right? And that's what's happening. Even some of the folks who are, more ingrained in the financial services industry recognize that that's happening, right? And so the typical way to invest in that case is it gets tougher because we got so many people just on autopilot. Just shove money in. I don't care what's happening, right? Just take it out of my paycheck, right? Just like the IRS does, right? So you don't have to think about it. And we're passively following their lead. And for people to wake up and say, is that right for you or not? Because part of it, you're entrepreneurs for a reason. You want to control your own destiny. And I think that's admirable. And I know how hard that is because going through it myself, I know it's challenging. But, to me, it helps you reduce risk because you're now more in control. That's why when people ask me where to invest, I said, one, your skills and personal development, right? You're going to carry that with you, hopefully, for your whole life and build on it. And maybe you can share it with your children or others. Invest in a business that you can own and control. Right? There's risk to it and heartache, right? It's not always going to work, but you're building something of value that you have your heart and your sort of mind and motivated to work on. Like that to me is powerful. And then like things like real estate, things that you can control. To me, I'd rather have more of the money there, right? In terms of investment, because I think it reduces risk because you have more control. That's just the philosophy we use. Now, you can speculate, go to the Bitcoin, all those sorts of things, but you better have the base down first, your foundational pieces, so that you can withstand those pains if they come.
Yeah, I think, talking about, we'll call them hard assets, tangible assets, when you talk about real estate or other things. I mean, you can talk precious metals as long as you own them on your person. They're in your safe. not on some ledger.
Right.
So people, they get burned all. There's so much. I don't want to say it's overwhelming. You have to be intentional. You have to be very intentional with what you want to, with your focus on wealth building, right? I mean, that's where a guy like you comes in, Tom. Like, you have to go to someone and listen, you can have 5 financial advisors sitting at a table, right? How do you know which one to talk to? If they all kind of like, they all do the same thing, air quoting the same thing.
Right.
But what's the real alignment? How do you get in alignment with someone like you and I would align because we're thinking the same, right? We understand what tangible assets are versus a passive strategy on the NASDAQ or whatever it is, right? Like we understand like what's going to give us the most freedom, right? What I can own. We talk about whole life insurance, stuff like these policies. We kind of get that, but how do you actually align that with people like you want to work with, like, or they're interested in talking? How do you figure out the alignment for that?
A lot of it goes back to, you started this podcast kind of, learning about yourself, right? Type of thing. And I think that's such a huge component to, obviously living our lives in a way that, we can enjoy and get fulfillment out of. But that goes with our investing and our financial philosophy too. Really understanding kind of how you're built and how you think about these things is so important. And that's where, for me, when I have the best connections with people I work with, is that our value systems align quite a bit, right? Because for me, I'm in the world in your world, I'm sure this is why we connect, is I'm not trying to tell people what they should be doing. I'm giving them education so they can empower themselves to do the best thing for themselves, right, and their families, right? It's not my job to tell you what to do. And so those are the types of people, for me, are a better fit, because I didn't want people telling me what to do, right? And I don't want to work with people that just want to be, give me direction on everything. Like, just tell me what to do. That doesn't really work for me. So really, it's finding the people who kind of align with your kind of just core values of how you see life and how you operate, I think is best. And that's why the advice things are always what gets talked about first, right? Because that's what's the natural. We're talking about financial. Where should I invest? Should I do a 401k or not? Whatever. That's kind of the micro. The macro piece is, okay, this tool of money, how do we maximize it so you can live the best life you want to live? That's way more important in my mind. Because if you want a tiny, simple life, a lot of these things don't even matter, right? You can get by with way less, right? You want to live a big life, right? That's a different animal, and you got to take the bulls by the horn. And that means you got to own it, and I can help partner with you. But in that way, it's getting aligned, because that's how best relationships and work relationships are built, right? To believe what we believe, right? Same with your clients.
I agree. I think alignment's really determinant on this being successful. I also think there still has to be work on the part of the investor. Okay. So me, who's ever coming to you, and I always remind people, it's so hard. They tell you it's hard. I'm like, well, you'll go and probably spend like 5 hours researching a TV you want to buy, going and looking at different things and the options and the speed and this and the 2,000-inch whatever and all this stuff, but you won't spend the same time on your wealth building strategy. Mm-hmm. It's like so backwards. You'll read all the reviews, you do all the stuff, and you won't spend a minute on your money. The thing that is like truly, I mean, security is the number one human core need. Right? It's the number one human core need. Money, okay, again, a tool, just like you said, described it well, is a security tool. It's probably the number one security tool that you can have to secure your family, the way you live, how you live, everything you do. So not to pay attention to it. Again, this is coming from a guy who didn't pay attention to his money for a really, really long time. Okay. And then not pay attention is like, it's a criminal act against your family. That's what that is. It's a criminal act against your family. Because this, you're a provider. Okay. I'm just talking to the business owner, maybe it's guy, woman, whoever, whatever it is, you're a provider, right? And there's responsibility when you're providing. You're just not dragging home the daily deer that you killed. Okay. I'm talking about like you're setting things up and you have the capability, especially as an entrepreneur, because you're in charge of your economic engine. You can pour all the fuel you want in the economic engine known as your business to take strategies and abilities to keep more of that you're going to make, that you can create more of. And I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm just trying to emphasize the ability to create a ton of money and have it create a ton more money with the right strategies, keeping your money, keeping the fruits of your labor, which is really what this is all about, right?
Yeah, and to that point, it's definitely when I'm thinking about business, and I can imagine just with this, I see this whether you have a job or have a business, is once you start making money, what's the next thing people want to do? They just want to buy stuff, right? They got to step up their lifestyle, which is the attractive thing in this country, in this world, right? You made it, so now I got to go spend it and live this high life. But it takes a disciplined type person to describe what you're talking about, to be responsible and say, you know what, I need to put this money to build more, right, in my business, right, to invest it wisely for the longer term. That takes some discipline and some education to understand how to do that. Yeah, we definitely need to be enjoying ourselves throughout life. It isn't just save money everywhere, but there is a discipline to this that has to be thought about for long term, which is, frankly, this is why a lot of this country is unfortunately not financially free, right? They're beholden to things that they don't want to be doing, jobs they hate, lifestyles they hate, because they've got them, right? The system has got them, right? If you want the freedom, you have to fight for it. And that means being a little bit more disciplined than most, right? And how to use your wealth.
Yeah, very true. I think there's a cool comparison I learned, and it's you got standard of living and you got quality of living. Standard of living is you make this much money, and when you make more, you buy more things. So you get a bigger boat, faster car, bigger house, whatever, and you keep living at your standard of living, right? Yep. It keeps increasing with the increase you make from pay raises or whatever. Then there's quality of living, which is time. That's a time margin. So if you increase your income, the goal should be to increase your margin of time with that income. Okay. So here's a simple, really real world example. If someone's cutting my yard, if it takes me 2 hours to cut my grass and do my landscaping every week.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm worth more than the, $100 I might pay, right? Like someone else should do that, because now I just bought my time. I bought 2 hours a week, 8 hours a month to do something, a whole day, a whole work day. I bought by paying someone $200 to cut my grass for the month. You know what I mean? So I'm like, well, I'm getting off pretty good on that. That's understanding quality of living. I can take a little bit of money, get that off my plate. I don't have to cut the grass, don't have to do any of that stuff. And now I got more time. I save 2 hours a day. So it's the mindset of quality of living over standard of living.
I love that. I love that.
And if you can do the investment strategy correctly, and we're using investment as that broad term, but creating the assets, deferring the tax, building that stuff in the vehicles we were just talking about. I think if you can see it, but I think the big thing you said, Tom, is the discipline, the big D. The discipline is what people struggle with, because we can get whatever we want with a push of a button. By tomorrow, right? Anything you want, you could have it tomorrow. When people tell me like the delayed on shipping, I'm like, there is no delays. This is the world we live in. Anything can be here tomorrow if you really wanted to get it, right? We're just full of first world problems. But the reality is everyone's got that. That's what drives them, is that now. So I don't have the word. This is the polarity between investment. This is what gets the now is the problem. That's what keeps them from investing properly. It's that polarity. It pushes the money thing away because they want it now. They don't want to wait. And I do that with my kids. I see it. You just made $1,000. Don't touch it. Yeah, I'm going to save 70%. I'm going to only spend 30. Okay. Well, why don't you have any money? Because you didn't save the 70%.
Yeah.
You spent 100% and, so now you're going to suffer. So yeah, it's
funny, because I explained this to my son the other day, and to your point about the education, that's why my heart is into helping educate as much as I can, because hopefully if I get the parents, it'll filter down to kids and such, and we can actually talk about money without feeling icky about it, right? It should be easy, right? Like if it's going back to a tool, does anyone ever have a problem talking about hammers, right? It's just a tool, right? If we put it in its place, and part of me says, you can have, and this is the thing I always tell them, I said, life can be hard or easy. It's your choice, and it's timing. You can do hard things now, like be disciplined, work hard, learn, don't get in trouble, right? And then life will be easier down the road. You take it really easy, don't do the hard things, don't save, don't study, life is going to be really hard down the road. You choose, right? You can choose your hard. And I said, you really have to get clear with that, because there's people who become elite in anything. They had to sacrifice things, right? All the fun, right? He wants to be an athlete. Well, you think these athletes are out eating shit? No, yeah. Right? Work their butts off and are disciplined to, be the people they are. And that same with our money and our wealth and our lives, right? It takes that, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is like anything, but it's a focus. And I think a thing you touched on here was, money is a tool. My phone is a tool. It can be a tool or a toy. That's your choice. You can play games on it all day, do stupid things, send memes, be an idiot, okay, then do all the other dumb things people do on their phone, or it can be a tool. Yeah. It has a schedule on it. It has alarms. You can contact business associates. You can do work. It's a computer, right? So you got to choose what it is. Money's the same thing. You can get it. You can go buy things. You can go out to eat. You can take your friends out. You can do all this stuff and then be broke and then wait till next week to do it all over again. Or you can go, well, I'm going to save the majority of my 90% of my money. I'm going to save. My daughters and my kids are doing this now. Right, she went and got a second job, okay, to make an extra $900 a month, covers car payments, gas, insurance, everything for that, so she can save $4,000 a month from her other job.
Wow.
Okay, it's discipline. Okay, that's like figure out how to make it work. Car will be paid off in June, in less than a year, and she bought it. It's a nice car, right? But she's got this figured out and she can save and build this. So then I was going to share this. So I'm talking to a friend the other day about real estate. I'm going, boy, I got 6 kids. And I started thinking they're all making money. I said, why don't we start an LLC? Why don't you guys start putting $1,000 to $2,000, figure out the number each in this every month. There's 6 of you. You could be putting away $12,000 a month to purchase real estate. Think of what you have in a year. Do these numbers. You can start accumulating single-family homes. By the time you're like 25, you'll have multi-unit real estate. You'll have single-family. You guys can be your own real estate company, like an investment group. Just because you got money now and you can put all this stuff in the pot, like we draw up the contract, we draw up the partnership agreements. I just thought of this the other day, Tom. So I'm sharing this live here. But I'm like I want to leverage. I have 6 kids. I want them to leverage what they're doing with each other because they like each other. Yeah. We're one of those families where we all like each other. People are they don't hate each other. So I'm like, start pooling that money. Actually, you could get that's like exponential growth. That's crazy.
It's a brilliant thing, and who else better? And people say, I don't do business with family and friends. I'm like, listen, who would I want to benefit most from all this? My family. Why not do it with them? And that's so that idea is great. And, it kind of lines up to the whole family banking environment. That's what they did, right? They
Right.
pull their capital together so they leverage it together
That's right.
and help grow their businesses, right? The same thing that you're talking about.
You know, they will be, you know what they'll be at 30 years old? 10 years of doing that. And as you make more money, you can put more money in. And then you're turning over these problems. Like, oh my gosh, you guys, you're like, you'll never have to work again. You'll all be at the point like, I've got 6 kids who are financially free before they're 30.
Right.
Okay.
Imagine that, right? I mean,
Yes.
be able to, and this is what I've come to believe, and again, the people who are working and, at jobs they don't like, and they just are counting the days till it ends, like, so I can retire, right? And again, this is, back to the broader thing we get sort of taught and sort of indoctrinated to. And I was part of it. So I kind of woke up a bit from it and I said, this can't be it, right? To work at a place where you don't want to be at for decades. Like, the concept of all this is just crazy to me when I really think about it. And then I can retire from it and quote unquote not do what I want to do, which is sit on the beach or whatever, golf all day long, which is, I can't do that forever, right?
We'll call it unfulfilling.
Unfulfilling, right?
You're not giving back to anyone. You just spent 30 years working somewhere to get your gold watch and your retirement, and now you're sitting around, and it's just, it's not for guys like us, Tom, like some people, that's the thing, and okay, more power to them, but you have a lot more to give. You have a lot more life to live and a lot more to give and produce for society, help others, and you can't do that if you're broke.
Right.
If you have just enough to sit around in a 1-bedroom apartment for the next 25 years till you check out. Okay, that's not living, right? So and I think, man, we could do so much here, but we go back to the freedom aspect, the control, the freedom and the control of your money, right? To create the security, to give you the freedom to do what you want, when you want, help who you want, how you want. You have to get up here and see this view. I think that's what's important. You have to really see the view to understand the tool, understand what this tool, money, can do from you from this level when you're able to keep it, right? Use it, grow it, and it's yours. And something you don't even support. Whatever program or whatever, or this or war, or anything else this stuff goes to, now you're in control of that. That's got to be the big takeaway.
Yeah.
You got to be able to look at it that way and go, now who can help me do that? And here's Tom. And here's Tom. All right. So that's what I'm getting at.
Right. And that's the thing, we're talking about leverage. One big leverage tool other than capital is collaboration and working with others. And that's where I sort of learned it from a financial arm. When I was around people who were advising me, they were all working in silos, right? They're not really talking to each other on behalf of helping me out. I'm the one having to figure it all out, right, as a client. And I remember those days, and it was very frustrating. My tax guy wasn't talking to the insurance guy. Insurance guy wasn't talking to the financial advisor, the legal guy. It's just too much. And so that's why when I went into this practice, I said, what can I do to add the most value to people that doesn't exist today or isn't pervasive? And that's why I kind of teamed up with a whole bunch of different types of providers, because what I do know is that I only know so much, right? And I know a lot of things, but there's probably 99% of this world I don't know about, like at that level. And so I need to be around experts, the A players, and people who are also thinking that way to work collaboratively with people, right, to help them as much as possible. And I think you can take that in a lot of ways. Like, I used to always want to do everything myself, and I just don't have an ego anymore around it because it just keeps you small.
Yeah, that's
right.
Awesome. So on that, let's share how people can get in touch with you, how they can follow you. How can they start this process? Someone might be in the very beginning of this process, say, you know what, this makes a lot of sense. I want that freedom. I want that control. I want that security. I want to do it right. I want to keep as much as I can. Where do they go? How are you going to help them?
Yeah. So a lot of folks, I have my, obviously my website, perennialpride.com, has a lot of good resources. I do have a podcast called the Perennial Pride Podcast. that I do weekly, and I've been doing that for about a couple years now with, a lot of different great guests and financial sort of education there. I would highly suggest people go there. I do have a book that I did write, which is crazy because I never thought of myself as a writer, but I have a book called Wealth Beyond the Numbers. And it was a book that I wrote that was at a point in my life. I was like, I'm mortal and life could end. What can I share to my kids that I have learned over the years that's helped me build my wealth and help me live a better life? Awesome. And I would encourage people to go buy that book. It's not really, you're not going to get a Pulitzer Prize rating in there, but it gives you some basic foundational pieces that help you, build your financial education to empower you to kind of think, how would you want to manage your life, right, financially? Awesome. So I would encourage folks to do that. And if you want to come talk to me, certainly you can schedule time for a free discovery session with me. You can book it right on my website, and we can see if there's something that we can help you with. More than happy.
That's awesome. Awesome. So we'll put all that in the show notes. That'll be in there. You guys can find those links, connect his website, his podcast. If you're looking for a good podcast, back to Tool and Toy, like there's some fun podcasts. You get a laugh, guys are being stupid, all that kind of stuff. And then there's the chance to learn something, increase your discipline and your knowledge and better yourself. So, let's at least get a balance in that. Let's have a few good learning ones and then have your fun ones. But I'd encourage you to find those podcasts like Tom's. And he's Perennial Pride, right?
It's the Perennial Pride podcast.
Awesome. Love it. So, find that, listen to it, and write the man a review. That's how podcasts grow. In case you people don't know that, okay? If you like someone's episode, you like someone's podcast, even mine, okay? Leave a review and don't say great show. Spend like 2 sentences saying, hey, that was a really great topic. Richard, you had that guy Tom on, and it was awesome. Or so and so and so, and I really like this and I like that. Those are reviews. Great show, that's not a review. Okay, you're being lazy. Okay, I'm just kidding. But so Tom, thank you for being on today. We hit some really good stuff. I just hope people are kind of open to thinking different, and I believe our audience is like that, and they're looking for those things where people can get in alignment, right? I think that's one of the big things we talked about today too, was alignment and understanding whoever you're working with. Alignment's critical. Okay, if I don't align with your values, there's no way we're going to get along. Mm-hmm. No way are you going to do what I would do or think is right. If our values are off, you're going to do things that can be sketch, right? And you're like, well, why are you doing that? Well, no, it works. You'll see the ends justify the means. Like, well, those people I don't work with, okay? People with those kind of values I don't work with, they might make a lot of money, but it's how they made it that matters, right? So, but I love the whole conversation today. I hope people grab a hold of this, understand, and give it some real thought, and reach out and start listening to your podcast. If nothing else, get more information, right? Go there. But if they want to talk to you, get your website, book a call, get on there and just start the process. Start learning, everybody. Don't think everything's about a sale. Okay? It's just get in and learn, start the process. You can take a little bit at a time because time goes fast. And next thing you know, you're there. You're at the end, and you're going to outlive your money. No one wants to outlive their money. That's my final warning. Okay, that's a bad place to be. Take my word for it. Okay, I don't think we need a high IQ to understand that aspect. Okay, so let's remember that. But thanks again, Tom, for being on today. It's been a great show. Appreciate all the time you've given us, and I look forward to talking to you again.
I love it, Richard. I appreciate you, and thank you for allowing me to come on here and share my crazy thoughts, and hopefully people got something out of it.
I love it. Well, thank you, and I'm sure they did. And don't forget, revenue feeds the ego, profit feeds the family. So if you want to see how I can show you at least $100,000 in hidden annual profits in less than 3 minutes, and not only show you where, but how to create that 100K in 6 months or less without additional advertising or marketing spend, guaranteed, just go to sharpenthespiritcoaching.com. See how truly simple it is. That's sharpenthespiritcoaching.com. Do it now.